gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll the union on.
Organized labor calls on Congress to make Phase 2 equitable and fair, a reappraisal of foreign trade, and the youth vote in 1972. This month, COPE Report examines these issues in a report especially for trade union officials.
We're gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll the union on.
The AFL-CIO took its case for fair and equitable controls in Phase 2 to Congress. COPE Report was there when Legislative Director Andrew J. B. Miller told senators,
"The Congress can and must play an important role in developing equitable and fair control mechanisms for the so-called Phase 2. This role should not be abdicated. Congress would abdicate its role if it agreed to amend the present law to provide that the act shall expire on April 30th, 1973, rather than May 1, 1972. This so-called Phase 2 should be tested by actual operation. Until that test, it would be a serious mistake for the Congress to extend the President's authority for 1 day, much less 1 year. Public confidence in an economic stabilization program must be earned with fairness, equity, and even-handedness. Extending this authority before this program is proven on these counts would only lengthen the time America might be stuck with an unequitable, unfair, and unjust program."
the administration has asked Congress to approve all of the decisions made by the Cost of Living Council during the wage price freeze. Mr. B. Miller argued,
"Decisions of the Cost of Living Council, which the administration seeks to have confirmed, were arrived at hurriedly and informally. The result has been confusion and chaos. These rulings, their clarifications, explanations, and clarifications of explanations comprise a document many inches thick. For example, since the initial August 18th ruling by the Cost of Living Council regarding teacher contracts and increment increases, there have been 2 official explanations, an official clarification, an unofficial clarification, and 2 supplementary rulings. They could be summed up this way: vague no, firm no, maybe, yes, no, no. But in one fell swoop, Congress is asked to approve, ratify, and confirm these decisions as they relate to teachers, as well as the hundreds of other decisions the Cost of Living Council has made. To do this without studying and approving or rejecting each one individually would be improper.
companies have used many dodges to get around the price freeze.
Given the hundreds of thousands of producers of goods and services and of retail outlets in America, the task of regulating prices is at best infinitely difficult and complex. Companies can, and many have, raised their prices during the so-called freeze. New products have been introduced. Monograms were added to shirts to qualify as a quality change. Automobile manufacturers added equipment as standard that was formerly optional and got a Cost of Living Council ruling if they could raise prices.
Because of these price gimmicks, the Labor Department reported that the cost of so-called frozen items rose 0.4%. Mr. B. Miller.
In other words, the government's own statistics prove that absent effective mechanism, the price freeze does not work. If there is to be a price control program, then Congress must provide an effective system for setting price standards, detecting price changes, and for apprehending and punishing those who violate the law. The penalties provided for price gougers in the administration proposal amount to little more than a licensing fee for potential price violators like the giant food chains or the giant oil companies or those industries which engage in administrative price setting. During both World War II and the Korean War, the law provided for treble damages and for suits by buyers who had been overcharged. Without effective sanctions such as these, the administration's proposals are simply an elaborate smokescreen to justify wage regulation alone.
To help control inflation, the AFL-CIO recommended that profits, interest rates, and credit be controlled along with wages and prices.
Profits are not frozen, much less controlled. In fact, profits are going up, according to the Wall Street Journal. At the same time, average weekly earnings are going down, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Since it is obvious the administration has no intention of controlling interest rates and allocating credit in a manner to benefit the entire economy, we urge the Congress to do this. Selective credit controls and interest rate ceilings must be established to curb the inflationary extension of credit for land speculation, business mergers, conglomerate takeovers, gambling casinos, and investments in foreign subsidiaries. Increased credit should be provided for housing, community facilities, and the regular operations of business firms that are not in the blue chip category.
The AFL-CIO asked Congress to spell out its intent in the Phase 2 legislation.
It must be clear that equality of sacrifice, not the sacrifice of equality, is the intent of Congress. Equality of sacrifice is what America's working men and women seek. They seek, and they should be guaranteed, equitable controls on all forms of income, corporate as well as personal, partnership as well as individual, unearned as well as earned.
Crisis. That is the only word that describes America's foreign trade problems. With trade laws and policies that were developed before World War II, America's trade disadvantage is growing. To get organized labor's view, Cope Report talked to Ray Dennison, an AFL-CIO foreign trade expert.
We feel that the nation has to make a reappraisal of its foreign trade practices because the world has changed. By that I mean that we live in a world of multinational corporations, we live in a world of managed economies, we live in a world of various and sundry restraints, non-tariff barriers they're called. We live in a world where you can fly machinery and technology around the world on a 747 airplane and transplant production from one country to another virtually overnight. So all of these events of recent years and decades have reshaped the world, and nations, governments, industry have taken advantage of these changes, and so we have a totally different world situation from that we had a decade or 2 decades ago, or even 5 years ago for that matter, and so we feel there has to be a new legislative examination of these problems.
The AFL-CIO is backing the Burke-Hartke bill, which would correct many trade problems. One provision of the bill would limit the number of imports flooding U.S. markets. Mr. Dennison.
There is a provision in the bill that says that goods that came into this country between 1965 and 1969 can continue to come into this country at that rate, but they will be allowed to increase in their amounts only as the American production of that particular commodity increases, so that we then retain a production base in this country. By this I mean, in dealing in very specific terms, at this point we do not make any radios in the United States, or if we do, they are only a handful. We virtually do not make any sewing machines, nor black and white television sets, nor typewriters, nor office machinery. And equipment after equipment that had been mainstays of production in the United States no longer are made here. These industries have been totally smothered, they have been totally suffocated, and they are now manufactured abroad, either by foreign corporations or by U.S. operations abroad.
Even America's defense industry is threatened by imports.
Much of our defense establishment could not even function, nor could they put together, for example, a Polaris submarine without many of the very vital parts coming from other nations. The propeller, for example, must come from Sweden. Now, when you have that kind of a problem, then your manufacturing capacity is definitely inadequate. You've probably read of the celebrated case of the ball bearing factories in New England, where very minuscule ball bearings are vitally necessary in defense production. And the last time I heard, they were down to one company, and it's probably going to go out of business. Vital parts of the anti-ballistic missile are now being assembled in Hong Kong under contracts with Lockheed. And they're doing it there because it's cheap labor and the company can maximize its profits. But while the company is maximizing its profits in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, and elsewhere, it is really undercutting the industrial base of this country. We can only go on so long supporting this kind of a program when our tax base begins to decline, our industrial productivity declines, and our standard of living declines.
Cope Report asked Mr. Dennison how other countries manage their foreign trade policies.
Japan has the entire nation geared up to export, and they have incentives of considerable amounts in loans and in subsidies and so forth, all of which are aimed at entrance into the United States markets. By the same token, when American products, American exporters attempt to go into their markets, they are met by any number of disincentives and non-tariff barriers prohibiting or greatly restricting the goods from entering those countries.
Mr. Dennison, how important is the Burke-Hartke bill?
The AFL-CIO regards the Burke-Hartke trade bill as one of the most important legislative measures ever to come before the Congress, and that's why we will work earnestly for its enactment, and we'll undertake an extensive campaign to bring the bill to Congress's attention, the senators, and around the country, and among our members, and among Main Street merchants, and local businessmen, and people in all walks of life who we feel have a direct stake in this bill. It is not simply a matter of union members losing their jobs. It's a matter of workers in all walks of life losing their jobs and having a ripple-out effect in Main Street and throughout the economy.
In 1972, there will be more young voters than ever going to the polls. What do they think? How will they vote? To get the answers, Cope Report talked with Penn Kemble, chairman of Frontlash 72. Mr. Kemble, how many young voters are there?
I think the best figure to think of them is 25 million, because there are 11.5 million young people between the ages of 18 and 21 who have recently received the franchise by the 26th Amendment, but there are an additional 12 million or 13 million young people who have not voted ever before in a presidential election. These are young people who were under 21 in 1968. The great bulk of this 25 million is now unregistered and will need to be registered by 72.
Is Frontlash just trying to reach young union members, Mr. Kemble?
We're not only interested in Frontlash in reaching people through unions. A great many young people are in low-paid, unorganized occupations. This is one of the difficulties that we have in getting them registered to vote, because where people are union members, they're generally much easier to reach for registration than otherwise. I would say that about half of this group are young working people. They're people who are not college students and are full-time employees. We're hoping to reach them in a variety of ways through unions wherever it's possible.
Mr. Kemble, aren't young voters apt to be apathetic?
Traditionally, young people do not vote in nearly as high numbers as older people. We're hoping, though, with the enactment of the 26th Amendment, that we can change that. I think a lot depends on the kind of organizational effort that can be put together by the variety of groups that are working in this field. I think if we can get to people when they're 18, while they're still high school students or still easily located in a community before they leave home, leave their community to go to work, to go to the armed services or whatever, if we can get them then and get them registered and get them plugged into the political process, the chances of changing the whole trend in low voter participation among young people are pretty good. This is one reason why we're so happy about the granting of the franchise to 18 to 21-year-olds. We think that those are people who are much easier to reach than people about 21 or 25, and we may be able to change the whole direction of voter participation in this country as a result of this.
Mr. Kemble told Cope Report about the organization Frontlash.
Frontlash was formed back in 1967 by a number of us who were very concerned about the growing polarization between college students and working people. We felt that there was a common basis for college students and young people in general, and trade unions in particular, in working together. We felt that unions had many progressive stands on domestic issues, on civil rights, on economic issues, and that these things were becoming more and more the leading issues in American political life. There are also issues of great concern to young people. We formed Frontlash out of a coalition of national youth and student organizations and the trade union movement. We started with COPE, the AFL-CIO. We got support from the UAW, from quite a variety of local and international unions. And since 1968, we've built, and this year we're hoping to be much stronger than ever before.
Mr. Kemble, is there any indication how these young people will vote in 1972?
Well, so far, although we are strictly nonpartisan in our own registration efforts, we find that of those who do sign up, the great majority are pro-democratic. There's a very big block of independent voters registering, but by almost 3 to 1 in most areas where we've done registration among blue-collar youth, these are not college students, we've found the registration has been heavily pro-democratic.
Cope Report continues on Side 2 of this cassette with a program designed to be played at local union meetings. On Side 2, a special program on Phase 2.
We're gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We will not be the only people in America to sacrifice. We will not stand still and see our contracts abrogated, our work standards destroyed, our earnings drastically diminished, while all around us, other sectors of the economy are doing business as usual.
That was the comment of AFL-CIO President George Meany after the pay board voted to abrogate existing contracts. And this is COPE Report.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Albert J. Zack, the AFL-CIO's Director of Public Relations, told COPE Report the reaction of labor members of the pay board.
The pay board has voted to abrogate legal collective bargaining contracts covering millions of American workers. The action was over the objections of the labor members. By a 10-5 vote, the pay board set a 5.5% maximum increase in new contracts, including wages and fringe benefits, and denied retroactivity for the freeze period, except under the most unusual circumstances. The board's action took money that was legally and rightfully due workers and put it into the hands of employers.
Organized labor made a proposal to the pay board. Mr. Zack told COPE Report what that proposal would have done.
The proposal of the labor members would have established economic stability and curbed inflation. Those were the goals President Nixon told the American people he had in mind. The action of the pay board will, on the other hand, create widespread economic instability. The AFL-CIO representatives on the pay board will make a full report on the decisions and the conduct of the pay board sessions to the AFL-CIO Executive Council and to the convention.
Labor members of the pay board acted in the best interest of all Americans.
Suffice it to say at this moment that labor's representatives acted responsibly, conscious both of their obligations to the workers we represent and to the well-being of America. They were conscious as well that no economic program can succeed unless it is based on the single fundamental principle of equality. Labor has long made it clear that we are willing to sacrifice as much as anyone else, as long as that sacrifice is equal and across the board. But we have repeatedly said we will not be the scapegoat for this administration. We will not be the only people in America to sacrifice. We will not stand still and see our contracts abrogated, our work standards destroyed, our earnings drastically diminished, while all around us, other sectors of the economy are doing business as usual.
Many problems confront America. Mr. Zack.
One of the major problems that faces America is a lack of confidence in the government and in the American economy. Consumer purchasing power, the lifeblood of the American economic system, badly needs stimulation. Until there is more consumer spending, America's industrial machine, now operating at only 72% of capacity, will continue to limp along in a state of stagnation.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
The government does not plan any effective enforcement of price controls. Internal Revenue Service agents are supposed to handle complaints about price increases along with their regular tax work. To make sure the job of price control is done, and done well, the AFL-CIO is establishing price watchdog units across the country to monitor prices. Leo Perlis, the AFL-CIO Director of Community Services, told COPE Report how these units will be set up.
The responsibility for monitoring prices is assigned to a standing committee of the local central labor body. It could either be the Community Services Committee, a subcommittee on consumer affairs, or an especially designated price monitoring watchdog committee. But in any event, this committee should be directly responsible to the central labor body. The committee may involve in its operations representatives of the auto workers, the Teamsters, other labor groups, in addition to representatives of community-wide groups representing consumers, women, the young, and also senior citizens and minority groups.
Mr. Perlis, how will these price monitoring committees work?
These committees may be divided into a number of subcommittees. One subcommittee could be on foods, another on rents, another on health services, and other subcommittees as they are required. In addition to that, the Community Services Committee or the Price Monitoring Committee should also address itself to establishing relationships with the Internal Revenue Service. The Internal Revenue Service has already notified its agents around the country that we will seek their cooperation. The committee should also work to establish citywide conferences where the purposes and the program of the AFL-CIO operation in watching prices and in keeping prices in line is told not only to the members of the AFL-CIO and their families, but to other labor organizations as well as the community at large through various media. In addition to that, this committee should involve the businessmen, perhaps through the Chamber of Commerce, in seeing to it that they enforce their own regulations and rules as provided for in the freeze and practice ethically.
What should I do if I think a store has violated the price controls?
Monitors and consumers and housewives and union members who find price violations in the marketplace should first address themselves to the manager of the establishment. If he satisfies them, then that ends that problem. However, if they're not satisfied, they should ask him to show his books, his records, so they have something to compare, something to go by. Failing that, they should address themselves to the AFL-CIO monitoring service. Through that operation, the violations and alleged violations, complaints, and grievances will be filed with the local agent of the Internal Revenue Service assigned for this purpose. Of course, the consumer could file a complaint directly with the local agent of the Internal Revenue Service, but in any event, there will be many sources where he can go for redress of his grievances.
What else can consumers do, Mr. Perlis?
As a consumer, union members, their wives, and other groups can call to the attention of their merchants, their businessmen, and the community at large the importance of keeping prices in line in order to maintain a stabilization program. The wages have always been lagging behind prices, and it is important for the consumers to understand the economic problems confronting and it is important for the consumer to be able to persuade the community that their welfare depends upon their complete cooperation in the AFL-CIO program of monitoring prices.
How can you determine when you're being overcharged?
There's an evasion by a number of merchants and businessmen and landlords of the price freeze regulations. Of course, when it is obvious, there's no difficulty. But there is no requirement anymore for the posting of basic prices as a frame of reference. This makes it more difficult for the average consumer to determine whether or not an item is charged more after the freeze than before the freeze. The point is that a consumer must learn something about the prices of items. He must be able to compare not only prices but also quantities and qualities. He must be able to inquire of the salesmen and of the managers. He must compare these prices against perhaps the advertisements which appeared in the newspapers prior to the freeze. He must also compare these prices with prices charged in other stores. He must beware of subterfuges which provide for the reduction of services, the elimination of quality goods, the elimination perhaps of sales and lower priced goods. He must be careful to see to it that the grades aren't mixed or downgraded. There are many difficulties that a customer will encounter in trying to obtain the right and accurate prices, but with some effort and some education, he may be able to do it.
Why did the AFL-CIO establish the watchdog units on prices?
The AFL-CIO has established the Watchdog Unit Monitoring Program for the purpose of doing the job which the government obviously is not prepared to do. There are something like 3,000 agents of the Internal Revenue Service assigned for this purpose. This is totally inadequate. In a nation of over 200 million people, it is impossible, simply impossible for 3,000 Internal Revenue agents to enforce the rules and regulations issued by the Cost of Living Council or by the Price Commission.
The decision of the pay board, labor's program to monitor prices. This has been COPE Report. And now, with a tip on the stock market, is AFL-CIO President George Meany.
Everything is Madison Avenue technique. Mr. Nixon puts on his grease paint and makes a speech. And the stock market goes up. You want to make some money? Next time Mr. Nixon decides he's going to make a speech on economic policy or foreign policy, you buy. Because the stock market is going to go up. But sell within 48 hours. Get the hell out. Because after the stock market goes up, the people, and this includes your big business tycoons, you know, he's their fair-haired boy, they say to themselves, you know, after the market goes up and they all Russians, they say, what the hell did he say? And they get reading and analyzing. He said it very well. Oh, he's a performer. He's without question, he's good. They look at it and they say, what the hell did he say? Well, he didn't say anything. So then the stock market goes down. Well, that's the time to get out, and Whately announces he's going to speak again, and then get in and get out.